I got back in, the latest was in November of 2010, and that's pretty much when everything hit me. All right, my name is Dennis Tackett. Basically, I've been in the Army for about 8.5 years. I have 3 tours, total of 3 years. 1 year in Afghanistan, 2 years in Iraq. You know, my first deployment was from 04 to 05, Afghanistan. My second deployment was from 07 to 08 in Iraq, and then 09 to 10 in Iraq as well. For me, it's always been a struggle because I have not personally been blown up or shot at. So for a long time, I didn't get help because, well, frankly, I was embarrassed. I felt embarrassed to talk about my situation where I had, somebody sitting next to me talking about how they've been blown up and they watched several of their friends die. It was really embarrassing to say, well, I've never been shot at or blown up, so why am I here? Unfortunately, because I didn't get help, it kind of added up and I made it internal. And because I made it internal, I became a pretty difficult person to be around, with my wife in particular. Took it out on myself, took it out on her. I felt nothing from my children, from my wife. I was basically dead inside. One memory that stands out in particular is Christmas of that year. I was with my family and watching my kids open up gifts. Anyone who has been in this situation can kind of understand that when you're watching emotions around you and you feel nothing, it's a terrible, terrible feeling. You should feel something, you don't. You're watching everybody else feel it, and it's like the world is passing you by and you have no idea what's going on. I always felt that suicide was kind of like a coward's way out. But at the time, I remember thinking, well, if I'm gonna be around for my kids' lives for this, and this is how I am, that's a terrible way for them to grow up. And so I tried killing myself. I took about 250 pills of everything I can get my hands on. Went to sleep holding my daughter, and that was pretty much that. I was content. I wrote a letter, and it didn't work, obviously. I spent about 30 days in the hospital trying to process everything, and it was then that I decided to go medication free. I said, I really need to get better, and I've been medication free since. It's been incredibly difficult. I went from feeling nothing to feeling everything, and that was the hardest transition because medication free really was not easy. When you go from feeling nothing to feeling everything, you feel like you're going crazy. You go from feeling extreme highs to extreme lows, and but it's evened out. I'm still pretty emotional from time to time, but I feel better today because I'm able to feel. Watching my kids smile and laugh is a great feeling.
My experience at Fort Carson as a soldier diagnosed with PTSD was very negative. At one point, we were instructed in our group therapy not to talk about our chain of command. In my particular experience in Iraq, my chain of command was a very big problem and a very big contributor to my PTSD. In an interview with NPR, I told an investigative reporter that we were instructed what we could talk about or not talk about in therapy. Now, as a former therapist who had worked in a private practice, I knew ethically that that was wrong. I knew that in terms of standards of practice that that was wrong. I just knew it was wrong, not to mention functionally it wasn't helping me to be told what I could talk about in therapy. So talk about barriers to treatment, there's one right there. I had 2 soldiers in my squad besides myself that were suicidal while still in theater. I was able to secure intervention from my battalion chaplain, which helped me. And subsequent to that, and this is while still in the combat theater, I was able to intervene on another soldier who was suicidal, but I did have my driver, who was assigned to me in my squad, attempt suicide with myself and a gunner in the Humvee that he purposely drove off the road. I thought he fell asleep on the wheel during a long convoy operation, which we did many convoys as a military police unit. He told me 2 years after the war that he had done it on purpose, that he was trying to kill himself, and he didn't care that he would take us with him. That didn't compromise my relationship with him. He's one of the best soldiers I've ever served with, and I understood, forgave him, if indeed he'd even needed that. When I first returned, the experience that I had in the treatment community at Evans Army Hospital was so substandard, and obviously not meeting my needs, paired with coercion and reprisals from the chain of command, and the stigma that there still exists to this day, including on Fort Carson, obviously. It befuddles me that almost a decade later, we're still dealing with the same stigma. We're still dealing with reprisals. We're still dealing with the abuse of command authority on Fort Carson. I had to seek therapy outside of Evans Army Hospital to get the help that I needed to not be dead today or not murder my wife and then commit suicide. I had to go off post to an off-post therapist to get the help that I really needed.
I deployed to Afghanistan with 4th Brigade, 4th ID, 361 Cav, October 2009. The 3rd of October of that year, 2009, Cop Keating happened. Cop Keating was a remote outpost that was overran by 250 to 300 Taliban forces against 50 to 40 American soldiers. And so during this attack, we took 90% casualty within the first hour. So we had a total of 8 KIA, 22 wounded. So the thought running through my mind was, today's my day. I'm done. I'm not going to make it out of here. A couple minutes later, I was standing there by myself, and I didn't know what was going on. I can hear gunfire, I can hear people screaming. It's just total chaos. I stepped out of the ASP, and as soon as I stepped out, an RPG hit 5 to 6 feet away from my location. Threw me back into the ASP, landed on ammo cans, knocked myself out. Didn't know I was knocked out. But when I finally came to, my saw gunner's like, "Sergeant Miller, you were hit." And I had blood all over my IOTV and my rig. My injuries, I understood I got injured overseas, but my symptoms didn't start showing until a week after the attack. And so I started blacking out. I was in the middle of conversations with people, and I would just stop and ask, "What are you doing in my room?" Or "What are we talking about?" So they sent me to the med station there on Fob Bostic. They had me get checked out. I'm walking to the hospital, and I go into the hospital, and the nurse or whatever she was like, "Can I help you?" I'm like, "My name's Sergeant Miller. I was in Cop Keating." That's all I said. I woke up. I was on a military aircraft to Landstuhl, Germany. I had no clothes on. The only clothes I had on was my boxers. I had my boots on, but I had no boot laces. Come to find out, I was making suicidal and homicidal threats while I was under, how many pain medications they gave me when I got to the hospital. When I got back from Afghanistan, I was on 25 medications. 18 of those were sleep additives. I couldn't wake up. I couldn't even focus throughout the day because I was just so tired because that's what they were forcing me to take. One night I was taking Ambien and I can't remember the other pill. And my wife and I were laying in bed, and next thing you know, I'm waking up to her screaming. I ended up choking my wife out, and I had no recollection of this event. I'm hearing what she's telling me. I'm asking, why are military people in our house? Why are they inspecting our bedroom? And after that day, I quit taking all my meds. I said, I'm done. I can't live with the fact that I could possibly kill my wife in my sleep and not even know what happened. 3 days ago was October 3rd, 2012. 3 years to the date was my attack. The first 2 years, I didn't know what I wanted to do. All I did was go to Gate 1 on Fort Carson and go to the memorial site and cry. That's all I did for the past 2 years on the date. And so earlier in this year, I read an article, and forgive me, but it was about a Marine Corps base in California. I can't remember the name of it. But what they were doing was soldiers or Marines or soldiers or airmen or whoever would carry rocks or carry some kind of form of their burden up this mountain. And once they got up there, drop off this burden basically at the top of the mountain. And so on the 3rd of October of 2012, 3 days ago, I carried 8 huge rocks with everybody's name that I lost that day on the 3rd of October 2009. Backpack weighing a total of 70 pounds. I carried that around from the 1st of October all the way to the 3rd of October, carrying that burden with me. And then I finished the 3rd of October with a hike. And at the end of the hike, I laid these rocks out. I cried, I did what I had to do, and I walked away. I'm still going to have that burden. I'm still going to live with that memory every night because I do. I have nightmares about it. But that was a way for me to feel like I got something off my back, off my shoulders.
So my husband separated from the military, I don't know, 2 years ago, something like that. And he separated right after his last deployment. So it was sort of deployment, some out processing, and then he's out. And then we moved to Colorado. And a few months after that, we're living in our first house. We're living in Palmer Lake. And I was pregnant. And we lost our baby. We lost the pregnancy. And my husband woke up. I kind of had a feeling for a few days that this was coming, right? And I'd been to the doctor and been to the ER and everything. So 6 o'clock in the morning, my husband gets up. I'm screaming in the bathroom, and I'm laying there in a pool of my blood holding our dead baby. And he couldn't be in the room with me. He couldn't be with all that blood. And it broke my heart because I thought, you can spend hours next to dead Taliban and you can't be in this room. What is that? Like, help me understand that. How can you carry dead bodies around? And how can you do that work and you can't do this? And his reaction was, and this was July, so it was a hot day. He put on several layers of sweatshirts and sweatpants and socks, and he got an extra comforter, and he got in the bed under all these covers, and he wouldn't come out. And it's not something that he can't go there with me. And my post-traumatic stress is much more on the surface. I want to talk to you about how I can't stop seeing this dead baby, and I want to talk to you about what happened, and I want to talk to you about how to dig it out of the toilet, the bottom, the underneath, the inside of the toilet. I want to tell you about how I struggled, and his version is the very opposite. And there are times where I kind of want to shake him and feel something, and maybe he went into the military that way. I don't know, because I didn't know him before he started deploying, right? I met him halfway through. Maybe being in the military exacerbated a tendency that was already there towards avoidance and kind of numbing. I will never really know. But we represent, I think, two extremes of how to deal with trauma. And they're at odds with one another. And so there are struggles there, for sure.
When I first came home, it was rough. The hooch I had in Iraq was about as big as a bathroom, and I lived in there for 18 months. And then when I got home, my bathroom became my hooch. So I sat in my bathroom for hours and hours and hours. I wouldn't leave. I would just sit in there and smoke. And my wife would leave for work, and she would leave a list for me to get done, and I wouldn't get it done. She would come home from work, and I'd still be in the bathroom where she left me. After about 4 years of that, my wife told me I got to change or she's going to leave. I had been out already for a couple months, so we went to Fort Carson, talked to the WTU, and they put me in touch with an organization, and they helped me out. And they were able to get me out of my bathroom and then to go to a weekly meeting. They've helped me try to get my life back. You know, I'll never get my life back. Today I was late because I was debating on coming. It's hard to get out and tell somebody your story. I don't like talking about my experience in the military, but I will talk about the PTSD factor. I was diagnosed with a TBI and an extreme case of PTSD. When I first deployed, I lost a soldier right away. He was only 18 years old, and he was my gunner. And so the replacement gunner they gave me, he was 18 as well. And I told him, I'm not gonna let him gun. I said, I'll gun. I could do my job and your job at the same time. I didn't want to lose another 18-year-old kid in front of my face. And we were driving one night through Fallujah, and the next thing I know, it looked like 4th of July, and that's the last thing I remember. They told me that the IED hit our vehicle so hard it ejected me out of the gunner station. I landed on my back, I busted my Kevlar, I cracked my SAPI plate, and then the next thing I remember, Doc was over me saying, dude, I thought you had died. I tried to seek help while we were in Iraq. I got treatment at a TMC, so they decided to put me on desk duty for a little bit. And then when you watch your guys go out mission after mission, you fight and scream to get back out, you know, no matter how bad you hurt, no matter what you're thinking, you know, I want to be out there with my guys. So I was able to get back out on mission. It probably wasn't the best thing, but it was good for me at the time. When we got home, I got a call about 3 weeks after we got home, my gunner committed suicide. So we flew out to California to go to his funeral, and it was pretty rough. You know, I lost 2 gunners. I had another replacement gunner. I had 3 on my last tour, and I only have 1 gunner, and him and I talk once a week. I don't know what to do about the suicides. I don't know what we need to do. I think a lot of it has to do with we get addicted to adrenaline. You know, it's a scary feeling when you roll out that gate, and then eventually, at first you're scared, but then eventually it's more like adrenaline, like you want it, you want to feel it, you know. And then when you go home, you start doing stupid stuff to try to emulate that feeling of adrenaline. You know, I know a guy who rides mountain bikes, so he decided he'd start riding the cliffs up at Pikes Peak. And one day he fell off the cliff. He got injured pretty bad, and then everybody's asking him, you know, why are you doing that? Well, it's easy for us to look back and go, well, he's seeking the adrenaline, you know, and that's why he's doing what he's doing. That's why we do what we do. We're trying to get that fix, that adrenaline fix. My counselor told me I have to stop playing video games. They said it's not good because I'm reenacting the war every day of my life, and I play nonstop. But you can feel it, you know, you see the loading coming up on the screen, your heart rate starts pacing, you start sweating, and you start getting into it. They say it's bad, they say you shouldn't do it, but I'm addicted to it, you know.
My name is Christina Perez, and first of all, I just want to thank everyone for coming out and the support. I think it's very important that we bring awareness to, as I say, our real lives. Behind closed doors, sorry, I'm trying not to get emotional. My husband was injured in June 2005. He's been diagnosed with severe PTSD, TBI. His back and his knees are messed up as well. In June of 2005, they were on a convoy and he got hit with an IED. And that's when he suffered his TBI, and think his back and his knees got worse then and whatnot. When he got back, it's March, April of '06. I've always worked, so I was working, and if it wouldn't have been for my nurse at work, seeing how much his difference was affecting me, I probably wouldn't have ever known that, you know, other than how he suffered differently, that he was going through some stuff. And so I talked to him, and, you know, I said, you need to go to the doctor, something's wrong. And he's like, yeah, whatever, you know. And I said, no, you need to go to the doctor, something's wrong. I said, you're forgetting things, you're losing things, you're getting lost. You know, that's not you. I think at that time he was in maybe 8 years, and he had just got promoted to an E7. And so I guess people call that a fast tracker. And his dream was he was going to retire from the military. He was going to be a commander sergeant major, and, you know, that was his life. That was his all. And he finally went to go get help, and they said, you know, the Army doctor said, there's nothing wrong with you. You're faking it. They said, you being the rank that you are, I have like 2 hours left to see all these other low-ranking soldiers, and you're wasting my time. And we're Hispanic, we're Mexican, and it's very hard in our culture to go ask for help. That's not something that, you know, we do, especially a man figure. We basically suck it up and, you know, we keep driving. And so for him to do that was huge in itself. You know, it made me realize that he does care about his family, and he does know something's wrong. And then to be told that, you know, that he's faking it and whatnot. How do you tell your 10 and your 6-year-old when they ask, Mom, why I just want my old daddy back? How do you explain that to them when you don't know yourself, when you're trying to figure out, you know something is wrong, but you don't know what? How do you tell your kids that? I know the husband that I sent the first time was not the one I got back the first time back. I know it wasn't the same one I got back the second time back. And you know what? That's probably would have been okay if they just wouldn't have spit in his face and just kicked him out. You know, my husband was part of like a unit of 5,200 soldiers, or 5,500. The first time they got back, we're probably part of the 1% that stayed together. The second time we got back, we're probably part of the half of that stayed together. That's not okay. That's not okay for the men and women who serve our country voluntarily and answer the duty or answer the call to duty to go fight a war regardless if they believe in it or not, and then come back injured because of war, and you just kick them out. That's not okay. That's not okay to the wives. It's not okay, you know, to the kids. It's not okay to the soldiers. What are they supposed to do? Like my husband, that was his dream. That's all he was going to do. I remember reading a couple months ago, another soldier had committed suicide, and someone had wrote that he was diagnosed with some other kind of PTSD. You know, it's because he couldn't deal with how bad the military turned their back on him. And that's true. And as embarrassed that I am to sit here today and say to you that if I would have left, my husband probably wouldn't be here today, that hurts. That hurts a lot, because I think we've got to the point that this is our normal. This is our normal, that we don't smile anymore. We don't take the kids out to the movies anymore. He can't coach the kids, you know, sports like he used to. And, you know, now, I mean, here we are 6 years later. My oldest is 14, my other son is 10, and my daughter's 5. And my 5-year-old knows when he flips out, he's like, she'll come and she's like, Daddy, it's okay. You're supposed to help Mommy. Or, like, I asked him today if he would come, and I'm like, you don't have to go up, just, you know, come support me. And he's like, are you serious? Are you serious? Like, you really think I want to go? And, you know, he's like, you're adding, like, it's like me doing insult to injury. And I was like, no, I said, because we need to let them know. I said, you know, we need to do it for us. We need to do it for everybody else. You know, a lot of my husband's soldiers are in jail. They're part of, like, I don't know if you guys remember from 2004 to I think 2010. There's a lot of them in jail. There's a lot of murders. There's a lot of domestic violence. You know, a lot of them are part of his unit. There's one in particular that he went down to the basement and he was flipping out and she was trying to help him, and he killed her and he killed himself and he killed their 2 daughters. And it's still happening, and that's not okay. But you get to a point where you're tired of fighting. You're trying to make the best of what you have. And I don't want to say you give up, but you accept that as your normal. So, I don't know, if there's any doctors here, I'll just close up with saying that if you're going to get involved with families, I think it's important that you stay with them, because it took a long time after being told, from my husband, after being told that he was lying and faking it, to trust Dr. Cosell. And we try to go 2 weeks without an appointment, and we can't because we're already calling because, you know, he's not okay. And for the VA to, he's now retired, but for the VA to, you know, my husband sees him 3 times a week. And for the VA to say, oh, come back once every 90 days for 30 minutes. We're wondering why they're dying. This is why, because they're being neglected. And a lot of the wives have left because it's hard. It's hard to live with someone like that. It's hard for the kids to live with someone like that. And so that's just part of my story.